Hello everyone, this is Manohar Reddy, Department of Cybersecurity, Institute of Aeronautical Engineering. Today I am going to discuss about the question bank discussion on MySQL constraints. MySQL constraints. So generally, the constraints are used to specify that rules or restrict the values or data will be stored in the table. So generally, constraints are used to what? Applying some conditions or applying some rules to access the values to store the values also. So the constraints in MySQL is used to specify that rules that allows or restrict the what values or what data. So what values or what data will be stored in the table. So we can store different types of data in the table. So for that all the data we need to specify the conditions or not. That is what we need to check it. So we need to specify conditions for some values. We need to put a constraints for some values or data. So here it specifies the rules or it allows or restriction to access that values, or to store that values. So they provide a suitable method to ensure data accuracy. So the main thing is what? It is a suitable method to ensure data accuracy and integrity inside the table. So the data should be in accuracy way and integrity way. So to maintain that the accuracy and integrity, we can put the constraints. We can put constraints to the both the columns and as well as tables. So it also helps to limit the type of data. It also helps to limit the type of data that will be inserted inside the table. So without specifying the constraints, you can insert more than one values. You can apply more than one data types. You can apply more than one duplicate values. So to do not occur these all the things, that is nothing but data accuracy problems, data integrity problems. We need to specify the constraints. So what are the types of constraints that we have to apply on the tables? So there are types of MySQL constraints. So constraints in MySQL is classified into two types. One is what? Column level constraints. So these constraints are applied only to the single column. So suppose I can have a table like a student. I can have a table like what? Student. If this is a table, or you can call it as a relation, or you can call it with entity also. So for this table, I am having the student ID. Student ID is one column. Student name is one column. And the student address is one column. And the student phone number is one column. So these are all the columns. If I am applying constraints to this columns, then it is called as what? These constraints are applied only in the single column. So you can apply either this column or either this column or either this column. Any of all these, you can call it as what? Column level constraints. That means simply you can say that what? The constraints which are applied to the columns, the constraints which are applied to the single column is called as what? Column level constraints. And the second one is what? Table level constraints. So table level is nothing but what? These constraints are applied to the entire table. That means all the columns must be applied with the constraints. So student ID applied with the constraint column. Student name is also applied with the constraint. Student address is also applied with constraint. And the student phone number is also applied with the constraint. So applying constraints to all the columns is nothing but what? Constraint of the table level constraints. So table level constraint, that indicates that what? Constraints are applied to the entire table. That indirectly shows that what? All the columns to be applied with the constraints. So how to create constraints? So we know that types of constraints, but how to create constraints? So how can we define that? So we can define the constraints during a table created. While creating the table itself, you can create a constraints to the columns. So by using create table statement, create table statement. And MySQL also uses the alter table statement. So you can do the constraints. You can apply the constraints by providing alter table statement also to specify the constraints. In the case of existing table. In the case of existing table schema. In the case of existing table schema. So you can apply constraints during creation of the table also, as well as altering the table statement also. So in these two ways you can apply the constraints. You can create the constraints. So what type of constraints you are applying? So constraints used in MySQL. Constraints used in MySQL. The following are the most common constraints used in MySQL. So these are the most commonly used in constraints in MySQL. So what are the types of constraints? First one is what? Not null constraints. First one is what? Not null constraints. Second one is what? Check constraints. Second one is what? Check constraint. Third one is what? Default constraints. Third one is what? Default constraints. Fourth one is what? Primary key constraints. Fourth one is primary key constraints. Fifth one is auto increment constraints. Fifth one, auto increment constraints. Sixth one, unique constraints. Sixth one, unique constraints. Seventh one, foreign key constraints. Foreign key constraints. So let us see how we can create each and every constraints to the column level or table level. So the first one is what? Not null constraints. First one is what? Not null constraints. This constraint specifies that the column cannot have null or empty values. So this constraint specifies that the column cannot null or empty values. That means it is indicating that what? The table column should not have any empty values or should not have any null values. That means indirectly it should have some value. Suppose taken as the student ID and or else is taken as the student name. If I apply not null constraint to this column, not null applied to this column should not have null or empty values. This column should not have null or empty values. Definitely it should have some values. These columns should have some values at least. So that is what we mentioned. So no need to leave the table without inserting the values in these two columns. So that is what we mentioned here. So for that we created a syntax here. So create table student. So we are creating the table called student. In that ID is one column, last name is one column, and first name is one column, and city is varchar data type. City is varchar data type. So here among these four columns I applied a not null constraint to these two columns. What are those? First name as well as last name. To these columns I applied not null constraints. That means if I not insert any value or not insert any value, then it shows that what inserted instead of inserting we have to insert some values. Instead of inserting null values, we have to insert some values. So here let us see example. Insert into student values of, we can inserting the values ID 1, last name Hanks, and first name Peter, and the city is varchar. Now this value is to be inserted because we are applied not null constraints, and here we are inserting values also. So that is inserted. But in the second case, insert into student values of ID we inserted and the last name not null. So we are not inserting any value, and the first name we are inserting, and the city also we are inserting. So in this case, from the above syntax, we have to mention some value instead of null. Otherwise, it shows the error like the column cannot be null. So what it shows the error? It shows the errors like the column cannot be null. So column should have at least one value, at least some value. So the column could not be null or empty values. So that is what it describes the column have at least some values. Column should not contain any null or empty values. It should have some values. Second one, check constraints. So it controls the value in a particular column. It controls the value in a particular column. It ensures that the inserted value in column must be satisfied with the given condition. So we are applying a condition to the column. So the value which you are inserting must be satisfied with that condition. In other words, it determines whether the value is associated with the column is valid or not with the given condition. Valid or not with the given condition. So whatever the condition we are applying to the column. So here take an example, age column. For this column we applied a condition like what? Age greater than equals to 18. So whatever the inserting value is satisfy this condition is to be inserted. Otherwise, if the inserted value is not validated means it is not inserted. So is not validated means it is not inserted. So based on the condition satisfaction, it inserts the values. So see here, example, create a table persons. So ID we are creating with the help of with the not null constraint, and the name we are creating with the not null constraint, and the age data type is what? Int check constraint. We are applying with what? Check constraints. The condition is what? Age greater than equals to 18. So whenever we are trying to insert some values, that value has to be checked by this condition. That value has to be validated by this condition. If the inserted value is validated with this condition, then value is inserted. If the inserting value is not validated by this condition, then it does not inserting, under it shows errors like check constraint is violated for key age. So see here in the example, insert into persons. What values? ID, name, age. Values of, we are trying to insert what? 1 Robert 28, and 28 is inserted. 2 Joseph 35 is also inserted. 3 Peter 40 is also inserted, because these three values whatever we are trying to insert are validated with this condition. So 28 is greater than equals to 18, 35 is also greater than equals to 18, and 40 is also greater than equals to 18. So all these conditions will be satisfied. But in the case of this one, 1 Robert 15, in this case 15 is not satisfying with the condition. So at that moment, the insert query is executed successfully. But the second case, the check constraint is violated for key age. So the value will not be inserted. So that is what we understand from this check constraints. So whenever you are applying condition to the particular column, then whatever we are trying to inserting value is validated with the condition. If it is validated, then the value is inserted. If the condition is not validated with the inserting value, then it is not going to be inserted. Third one, default constraint. This constraint is used to set the default value for a particular column where we have not specified any value. So we have not specified any values. It means the column must contain a value including null also. So this constraint is used to, for what purpose? Set the default value. I am not going to insert for another next level or next column. So next time I am not going to inserting means, then you can mention the default to the particular column. So that all the column values will be by default the given value to the particular column. So how it works here? See, So create table persons. Create table persons. We are creating the table called persons, and in that ID is created with the not null constraint. Name is created with the not null constraint. Age is integer data type, and city varchar of 25. So whenever we are specifying the constraint, you need to specify the constraint name and the constraint value. Default value is what? New York. So whenever I am trying to inserting values, like what? Insert into table name. Insert into table name is what? Persons. Values of ID 1 comma name Raj comma age 28, then automatically if you are not mentioned any value in the sense, by default it takes New York. So this is the first one. In second case also Ram and it's 32. Whenever we are closing this condition, then automatically it takes New York is the city for default city for Raj and Ram. So New York is the default city for both IDs 1 and 2, because we are not specifying a value to the particular inserting value. So for that, by default it is taken as the constraint value what we are mentioned on that column name. So New York is the by default condition value, so that New York will be inserted for these two values. So this is what we understand from default constraints. Next one, primary key constraint. So this constraint is used to identify each record in a table uniquely. If the column contains primary key constraints, then it cannot be null or empty. And a table may have duplicate columns, but it can contain only one primary key. So it always contains unique value into the column. So whenever you are applying primary key to the particular column, it should have some values. It should have some value, as well as it should not have null value, and it is having unique values. So for these three satisfaction, we must use this primary key constraint. So here we are creating a table. Create table persons, ID integer not null, as well as primary key. So we are applying not null and primary key, means the primary key indirectly takes that the ID should contain some value, and that value is unique value. Name varchar of 45 not null. So name should not be have empty value or null value, and it should have some at least one value. And the age integer, city varchar of 25. Now if I am trying to insert into persons ID name age comma city, the values will be 1 Robert 15 Florida is inserted, 2 comma Joseph 35 California is inserted, and 3 Peter Fort Alaska is also inserted. But whenever I am trying to insert the same value with the ID 1 Stephen 15 Florida, is not able to insert because the one is already inserted as a primary key. So at this moment the one value could not be inserted. Because the one is applied as a primary key as well as not null. So not null means it is having value, and but primary key it should have only one value, that is unique value. So no need to have duplicates again and again. So that is what we understand from this primary key constraint. Auto increment constraint. This constraint automatically generates a unique number whenever we insert a new record into the table. Automatically the values will be inserted in automatically incremented way. So generally we use this constraint for the primary key field in a table. So whenever you are applying this auto increment constraint, the column can have the column can have by default the column can have by default incremented values because if we are specifying the condition auto increment condition. So in this case, by default it is taking all the column values in order auto increment way. So if you want to rename or change your column values, then you don't need to specify auto increment values. So see here, create table animals. So we are creating the table called animals, and id integer not null auto increment. So we are applying auto increment to id column, applying auto increment to id column. So that means id values we are not going to insert. Id values we are not going to insert. So by default it is taking auto increment values. Whenever we are inserting values, automatically takes first value, second value, third value, fourth value, fifth value, like that. It is taking all the values, how much we are inserted. So for each and every inserting value, it is taken as one number, and it is automatically incremented to the next inserted values. So here name care of not null, and primary key is what? id. So id contain non-duplicate values, and also it is in auto incremented way. That is nothing but what? Ascending order way. So here insert animals name values of. So we are inserting values what? So the table name is what? Animals. In that the name of animals, name, and the id. So whenever we are trying to insert this tiger, dog, penguin, whenever we are trying to insert camel and cat and ostrich, automatically for these values, automatically the id is incremented in this way. So no need to insert a value as id in these columns. So because of we provided auto increment value to the id column, auto increment condition, auto increment constraint applied to the id column. So no need to specify 1 comma tiger, 2 comma dog, like that, because we are assigning constraint auto increment to the id column, and that id column is also a primary key. So then it is not having any duplicates, and it is displaying the ascending order way. Unique constraints. So unique constraint, this constraint ensure that all values inserted into the column will be unique. All values inserted into the columns will be unique values. It means a column cannot store duplicate values. So any column, if you want to make any column is to be non-duplicates, then you can put unique constraint to that column. So here the syntax is what? Create a table shirt brands. So shirt brands is the table name. That I am creating what? id integer type, brand name. So brand name varchar, and I am applying unique constraint to this brand name column. Brand name column, and the size varchar of 30. So among these three columns, I am applying a unique constraint to this brand name. So that means the brand name column does not allows the same values or duplicate values. Let us see the example. Insert into the shirt brands. id comma brand name comma size, the column names, values of what values where I'm trying to insert. The value is 1 comma pantaloons comma 38. So id, brand name, and size we are inserting. And the second way is 2 comma Peter England comma 40. I am inserted. So these two values are inserted. So again I am trying to insert one more value is what? 1 comma Raymond comma 38 and 2 comma Peter England comma 40. So I am applied constraint to this brand name column. So Brand name column should not contain duplicate values. Brand name columns should not contain duplicate values. So whenever I am trying to insert the duplicate value for the second time, it is not able to inserting because it shows that what error duplicate entry Peter England for key brand name. So it is already inserted and now you are trying to enter what duplicate brand we are trying to insert. So it is not taken as a inserting value. So from the above we can see that the first insert query executes correctly, but the second statement fails and gives an error that says what duplicate entry Peter England for key brand name. That is what it maintains. So if you want to apply unique columns to the another columns also, so that the column should not allows duplicate values. And the next one, foreign key constraints. Foreign key constraint. This constraint is used to link two tables together. So this constraint is used to links two tables together. So linking two tables together. So it is also known as what? The referencing key. It is also known as the referencing key. A foreign key column matches the primary key field of another table. A foreign key column it matches the primary key field of another table. So it relates between the two tables. One is from the primary key table and the second one is the referencing key table. So it means a foreign key field in one table refers to the primary key field of another table. So one table referred with the primary key, one table referred with the primary key, and the second table referred with the foreign key. Second table referred with the foreign key. So now see the syntax. So create table persons, person ID integer not null primary key. So this is what the person table primary key. So person's table primary key. Name varchar of not null, age int, city varchar. And similarly, I can create one more table, second table, create table orders. So order ID integer not null primary key, order number integer not null, and person ID integer foreign key of. So this is the referencing from the first table. So here references persons of person ID. So person ID is the primary key table of one, and here it is a referencing key for the second table. Referencing key for second table. So now it relates between two tables and linking the two tables because of the ID is provided as a referencing key for the second table. So now the values will be retrieved from two tables by applying this constraint. So this is the way you can understand the constraints, foreign key constraints. So once again we revise the topics which we discussed in this session. So here first one is what? The constraint. What is meant by constraint? So what is meant by constraint? So constraint is nothing but applying specific rules or conditions that are allows or restrict the values or data will be stored on table. So you need to inserting the values in the table will be on basis of conditions. So for that you can apply two types of constraints. One is what? Column level constraint, and second one is what? Table level constraints. So applying constraint to the columns, std id, student name, like that. So applying constraint to the columns is called as what? Column level constraints. Applying constraint to the all columns is nothing but what? Entire table. So applying constraint to the entire table is called as what? Table level constraint. So how to create constraints? So we can create the constraints during the creation of the table, as well as altering the table statements also. So whenever you are altering the table statements at the moment also you can create the constraints. So what are the types of constraints? Not null constraint, check constraints, default constraint, primary key constraint, auto increment constraint, unique key constraint, and a foreign key constraint. So not null key constraint specifies that what? The column should not have null or empty values. At least it have some values. So that because of that we inserting these values with the help of some values. So without having any values, That column shows that what errors? The column cannot be null. It shows that error column cannot be null. And second one, check constraints. So it specifies the condition on that particular column. So based on that condition, whenever we are trying to inserting value is validated to that condition, and if it is validated, then value will be inserted. Otherwise, the value will not be inserted. So it shows the errors like what? A check constraint is violated. Check constraint is violated for the particular key age column. Default constraint. So by default constraint is applied to the column means you are not going to inserting that column because of that value is inserted as a default. Value is inserted as a default. So no need to specify, no need to insert another values because of that we specified as a default values. And primary key constraints. So primary key constraints are nothing but what whenever if you the column could not be null and column could not be empty and column could not have any duplicates, in the sense you can apply primary key to the particular column. And auto increment column. So whenever you are trying to insert values, no need to write IDs, in the sense then the ID will be by default taken as an incremented IDs. So that is all displays in the ascending order. And unique key constraints. So unique key constraints means if you are applying unique key constraint to the particular column, then that particular column should not inserting any duplicate values, and it does not allow duplicate values. So it shows the errors like what? Duplicate entry for the key, Peter England for key brand name is not validated. And forward key constraint. So applying primary key to the particular column from one table will be acting as a referencing key for the second table, so that those two tables are linked together and displays the result. So this is all about the discussion of question bank on MySQL constraints. Thank you all.
Like, share and subscribe. Hit the bell icon for more updates.